Welcome to Credentially's podcast, your HR healthcare kit.
Hi, Julie. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
You having a good day?
I am having a good day so far. Thank you. Yes, it's Friday. It's my no work day. So
Excellent. Well, I'm sorry to have interrupted your no work day, but hopefully this will be fun. You've got a lot of experience in HR, both through your own work and through your podcast. And one of the things that drew us to it was, you're trying to get rid of misconceptions about HR and learn from professionals in the industry. And we are focused on helping to improve HR and compliance in healthcare specifically, but also in improving HR in general. And so before we get started, it would be really great if you'd be happy to introduce yourself and give a little bit about your background and how you got here, because I think it's a really interesting story.
I got into HR through a manager who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. But the journey really started when I first got terminated in my first job ever. And I just thought it was done so poorly. I didn't know what my legal rights were as an employee at the time. And that kind of started me on this journey of like, how do I make sure that going forward, this doesn't happen to me? And how do I make sure that if I ever get into a leadership position, I don't do what that manager did to me? And so I started going through admin positions. That's how I first got into HR, was through admin. Met this manager who changed my life and asked me a question I'd never asked myself before, which was, had I ever considered a career in HR? Because she thought I was really good with people and that I, took my time to really support people. And that started me researching HR. And a couple of years after that is when I actually got into my first HR role. And I've never looked back. From then till now, I've been in HR. So my career spans over 15 years. Like I said, I started at the bottom and I worked my way up. My last corporate position was as a head of HR for a tech company. And that was my last corporate HR role, and hopefully will be my last corporate HR role ever. After several bouts of burnout, lots of frustration, just working in organizations with leaders who don't understand HR. I think people have their own conception of what they think HR is, or leadership have their own perception of what they think HR is, but it's not that. And if you're an HR person who doesn't have a strong voice to explain or articulate what HR really is, you can get stuck in the box that the people put you in.
Yeah.
That's the only way I can explain it. And so 3 years prior to me leaving corporate, I started this journey of I always ask the question, where is the HR for HR? Where's the person to support me when I'm dealing with this crazy, when I'm dealing with leaders that don't understand why I'm here or what my purpose really is, who are sticking me in a box that has nothing to do with what HR really is. And I started talking to other HR professionals who were having the same problem, and I just started coaching them through their issues and their concerns. And during the pandemic, I decided, you know what, I'm going to make a business out of this. I registered my business. I started having those meaningful conversations. And today, 6 years later, I am officially your HR for HR coach.
Well done. That's an amazing journey, and it kind of brings me really nicely to the first question I wanted to ask you, which is, what do you think is the biggest misconception about what HR is? You said there's a lot of people out there, bad managers, let's say, that don't know what HR is, and HR doesn't have a good voice at the table, and they have this misconception or this idea of what HR is, and it's wrong. So, what do you think that biggest misconception is in your experience?
It's a good question. It sounds like the question I ask on my podcast. The biggest misconception for me would be that, HR is the hiring and the firing squad. That's all we're there for. We're there to hire people, pay people, and fire people when you want us to fire people, and fire them without question, without pushing back. We're just there to execute whatever you want us to execute. But we're not, that's not what we exist for. That's not what we do. But again, like I said, you get put into this box because that's what people's perception of HR is, but it's not.
And that's can get really toxic. If HR is seen as the hiring and the firing squad, then anytime someone has an interaction with HR, they think, oh no, either it's really great because I've just got a job, or it's really bad because I'm going to get out of the door. So it kind of brings me on to my second question then. So what do you think HR should be like? What's the utopia? What's the goal that people should be aiming for if they want a really great HR function in their organization?
It's one of my favorite questions. I describe HR as the people experience operations department. We provide experiences for everyone in the organization. And it should be the best experience that people could possibly have. So when you think about an HR professional, you should see an architect. You think about how an architect takes your ideas and makes this really amazing building that you want to, have your offices in, or build your business in, or build your brand in. They take the time to really understand your needs to create this beautiful space that you want. And that's what an HR professional is. We are people experience architects. We are the foundation, the heart of the organization. So we should be working with leaders to understand the business and create the best talent or opportunities for people to come into the organization and build their careers and grow, and either move up and we're okay with that, or they move out and we're okay with that too. But when they leave, they can say they had it was one of the best work experiences that they ever had. That's the goal of HR, to create the best experiences.
You know what that means though, don't you? You're going to have to change the hashtag HR on your wall to hashtag PEA for people experience architects.
Yes.
I like that. People experience architects.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear kind of an example of kind of what that looks like. So, maybe if I'm an employee in an organization that has a really great people experience architect or HR professional that has a seat at that table, and so isn't just the hiring and firing squad, like what would I see differently as an employee?
So everything should be different, from your recruitment experience right through to your onboarding journey, to your development journey throughout the organization should all be different. In other words, you should see HR not just when you get hired or when you're in trouble, but you should also be able to have conversations with your HR around, what's working well, what's not working well. So the psychological safety that should exist should mean that you should be able to just, pop in, not necessarily pop in, but you should be able to have open conversations with your HR team anytime about what's bothering you. So when you think about people being hired into the organization, that recruitment experience, constant contact right through the entire experience. So we're not ghosting candidates, whether they're successful or not, because we remember when we're building pipelines, we get the best candidate at the time, but then we may also have other openings for those roles in the future. And we want to make sure that other candidates felt heard or seen so that they would reapply again, so you could keep them in your pipeline, right? And once you've hired the best candidate that you want for this particular role, when they come into the organization, before they even get there, they should know everything about the organization that they need to know: who their manager is, who their team is, where they're going to be sitting, what they can expect on the first day, who are their key stakeholders. They should know little things about those people that are personal to them. What's your favorite color? What's the favorite thing you like to eat? They should know some kind of things personal to their team.
That's
so that
nice.
when they come through the door, it's like they already know. They already have a sense of like belonging to this team, to the organization.
Yeah, they don't feel like a stranger.
They don't feel like a stranger on the first day. They have all of their equipment, right? There's no issues with IT. Everything is there when they need it. they're able to sit in their space and feel comfortable in their space, which means that we've thought about everything that could possibly relate to that person that makes them feel like, how can we make this person feel like they belong? Do we have a chair that makes them feel comfortable, that it is aesthetically pleasing to them when they sit in it? If they're tall, if they're short, are we going to be there to give them all the necessary adjustments that they need to feel comfortable from an ergonomic perspective, right? And then we're going to be onboarding through them getting to see key stakeholders, getting to understand the business. Because I think when people understand that they're not just there to play a role, but they are there to help enhance the big picture of why an organization exists, that helps people to feel spot on, like, yes, I get it. I understand why this job exists, and I understand what my role is in this organization and how I'm here to make a difference. People start to think differently about being more creative and innovative that way. And then as they are going through their work career, you show up at different points in time. You don't just show up when it's their birthday, but you show up to congratulate them on passing their first year anniversary. You want to know what's working well, what's not working well. So you're constantly showing up and creating experiences for them. Where do they see themselves? When you see that performance review, you're looking at it as HR to say, oh, a couple things are flagging here that may look like red lights, and I might need to have a conversation with the manager to find out what's happening here with Kit. How can I make this, how can we help them make this experience better? We're conducting stay interviews, right? So we're not just waiting for people to leave, but we're trying to figure out, how can we keep you here? And even if we can't keep you here, what can we do to help keep the next person that comes through the door here? We're constantly reviewing roles and understanding, is the role that you're in still relevant? Does it still make sense? And if it doesn't, where would you like to be? And if you wanted to upskill and move somewhere else, how could we get you the necessary training to get you where you want to be? It's a whole different experience because you're constantly involved and they're constantly seeing you, which means you're building trust. Right? You're building trust, you're building empathy, you're building a relationship with the person in a way that you wouldn't normally build the relationship. It's not about HR seeing you through the door, welcoming you, and then disappearing into an abyss until you make a mistake, or, you know, you get called before us. The firing squad is what people would call us. That's not what a people experience architect looks like. What I've described to you in a nutshell is what a people experience architect looks like.
That's great. So if I could get you to say the three biggest mistakes then, just because seeing HR as the hiring and firing squad, not making sure that people feel welcome and have everything that they need to know, and little things about their team so they can come in on the first day and say, hi, Susan, I know you've got a cat and I know that you enjoy windsurfing. And then not having those state reviews. So not kind of keeping track of where people are, but just only engaging with them when there's a problem or when it comes time to move them. Would you say that's
absolutely
three biggest problems? Okay. That's fantastic. Sure. So we've obviously had a pretty crazy couple of years, and a lot of people have had to do things remotely for the first time. And in HR, that can be a specific challenge. So in our industry, which is healthcare, we work with healthcare providers to help them automate their pre-employment checks, onboarding, and then ongoing compliance. And they've had to go from doing that largely face-to-face or with stacks of paper to having to automate that using technology. So I'm interested to hear what you think about automating that work versus having people do it in a more labor-intensive way, to try and ensure that you can have that high-touch experience, but it's focused on kind of building motivation and having exciting conversations rather than being, hey, you need to send me that form, or hey, you need to come in and you know, fill out these 10 certificates.
You know, I truly believe in that automation is necessary, especially in HR. Because, like I said before, a lot of times the perception of HR is that on the surface, if you think about the iceberg, we always talk about what's happening on the surface, but what's really happening below. And you think about the iceberg, a lot of people only see what's happening on the surface, which is the hiring, the paying, the firing, and all that stuff. But below the surface in HR, there's a lot of other stuff that's happening. We're analyzing data, we're creating policies, we're creating reward and recognition experiences, we're understanding performance, building talent, recruiting and onboarding, and creating special experiences in that space. And we can't, a lot of times as HR, we can't get to those things because a lot of what we do is manual. A lot of what we do isn't automated. And so asking ourselves as HR the question, what could we possibly re-engineer in our processes to make it run smoother, but also so that we could now focus on other things that are really important at the bottom of that iceberg, the things that really, really matter. We don't get to the meat of a lot of that because we're stuck in the box at the top, which is where most leaders have it. So I always say, audit your processes. Again, which comes down to talking to your people. But I think the biggest fear that we have as HR is that if we automate, it means we're no longer relevant and we no longer may have a job.
Yeah.
But I say shift your mindset to thinking that if you automate, it gives up room for you to do other stuff that's happening in HR. You just mentioned we've been through a really difficult time. And I know as HR, we spent a lot of time on the front lines of this pandemic and all these social injustices and different things that have been happening in the world. And we haven't been able to really break ground on certain things because we've been stuck in the day-to-day admin stuff, that if we re-engineered it and automated some of those processes, we could get to the deeper parts of those things. So for me, automation, I think is paramount. It's the way forward for us in HR so that we can get to the deeper things in HR. We need to do some re-engineering and automation to help us get there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And this is something that it's a conversation we often have, which is, you as a HR professional, you rightly said, think, well, if I automate something that I'm doing, does that make my job less valuable? And I think the people that we see that do this really well appreciate actually the thing they can do that will never be automated is the really human thing. It's building a relationship with someone, it's understanding their motivation. And I think that might be unautomatable, but if they can't do that because they spend all of their time chasing forms and emails and editing spreadsheets, then they lose out, because that motivation can be the difference between placing a candidate in a role that's perfect for them, or finding out between candidates which is going to be right for that position, or maybe keeping a candidate that if you had a bit more time you could notice something going wrong and you could give them the mentorship and support that they needed, that would otherwise be someone that the organization loses, which is very expensive and time consuming.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head.
Thank you very much for your time. Look forward to chatting again sometime.
Sure.
You have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Search Credentially for your current healthcare staffing insights.